Enter Tom Bombadil in the strangest intro of all time. How you been, Clifford?
I've been good, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good as well.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I had a snow day today. It was kind of fun.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I heard about some crazy snow in Denver.
There is a lot of snow. I'm missing out right now on making an igloo.
Oh, man.
Yeah, everybody else is doing that, and I have to do this in a nice, toasty, warm room.
You get to do this.
All right, Clifford, what are we doing today?
We are doing Chapter 6 of Book 1, Fellowship of the Ring, The Old Forest.
Oh, what'd you think of the chapter?
I enjoyed it. I have to admit, this chapter and the next one are just like one of my favorite little sequences from the book. And it I don't know if it makes it any better or worse, but a lot of this was not in the movies, and so it lends it an extra mysterious air. Because it's not something that I don't have an immediate image in my head, or rather, like, all of the imagery comes from my own imagination and Tolkien's writing.
Nice, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a fun aspect that I hope everyone else witnesses a little bit if they're reading this.
Yeah. All right, so topics for today, we'll talk about just really quick, we'll just hit the departure into the forest. We'll talk about the forest itself, obviously. We will talk about this Old Man Willow incident and introduce the one of the most unique characters in the entire book. But before all that, Cliff's Notes. Let's go.
So, Merry wakes Frodo first thing in the morning, with everything ready to go. The hobbits depart in the morning darkness. Fatty Bolger accompanies them to the edge of the hedge that separates Buckleberry from the old forest. They pass through a long tunnel and locked gate and into the forest. Their spirits are cautiously optimistic, but the forest is dense and confusing. There's a persistent feeling of being watched, but when Pippin yells in frustration about just wanting to pass, the trees seem to move apart and form a path. They alternate between feelings of being lost and constricted and feeling upbeat and on course. The forest, though, does direct them off course, and eventually they reach the river with Windle. By the riverside, everyone begins to fall asleep. Frodo by the edge of the river, Pippin and Merry against the trunk of an old willow. Sam wakes them just as the surroundings have begun to swallow them. In the distance, singing is heard. A man with an armful of flowers appears and saves them. This strange Tom Bombadil leads them through a setting sunlight to his home, which feels fully magical in their exhaustion and confusion.
Nice. Hey, I don't think the trees moved for Pippin though. I guess we'll get to that, but
yeah, we'll get to that. I think they do actually.
No, I think they get mad at him and.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right. Okay.
I'll pull out some references for you.
All right. So at this point, we finished 5 chapters of this book. It's fair to say it's been a slow build at best, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
But this is actually kind of where the story starts to get moving. And so one of the notes was like, it wasn't the names that really got the story moving. In fact, the names probably made it longer because, he's just starting to go into backstories about all sorts of stuff like Buckland and like Farmer Maggot's history and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So what kind of got the story going, like set an adventure, was Tom Bombadil, because he actually predates Lord of the Rings completely.
Really?
Yeah.
Because he was in early drafts of Tolkien's, or what?
No, there was just a publication of The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by Tolkien, obviously, in the Oxford Magazine in 1934. So like his adventures with like this old man Willow guy and stuff, that was already done before. I think we'll talk about that. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more in the next chapter, but this is we're on to like probably the second phase of the story, if you ask me. Out of the Shire completely now, new, and especially the movies, like very new stuff, because we have no experience unless you've read the books before. You have no experience with this part.
So stop me if you want to dive into this a little bit later on, but this brings to mind a book that many listeners may have read or heard of when they were younger, The Wind in the Willows. It's a children's book, but it's really, really long. Like I would consider it adult length, or like a children's epic or something.
Which like 6th grade reading level or freshman year?
No, definitely grade school, but it's really beautifully illustrated, and it follows around like Frog and Toad and maybe like a muskrat or something like that.
Oh wait, maybe I've heard of this.
And Badger, and they're the characters talk to each other. But
Land of the Willows.
The Wind in the Willows.
Oh, Wind of the Willows. Land of the Willows is something in the Silmarillion. That's the first thing that comes up in the search.
It's my understanding that this was a really, really popular book, and still is to this day. It was published in 1908, and then parts were republished a little bit later on, just before you were saying Tolkien published Tom Bombadil and his adventures. And the setting for this whole chapter is amazingly similar to The Wind in the Willows, or at least what I would imagine. Like maybe it's this sort of like romanticized English creekside setting. Like I'm sure the environment is totally based on the English Isles for both of these stories.
Dude, I feel like I've seen a cartoon of this.
They might have turned it into some animation. I'm not really sure. But point being, for the folks who know this out there, this is the setting that or part of the setting that comes to mind for me in this chapter. It rang a bell because you were pointing out one of Tolkien's early stories, which I'm sure he would have known about this book at the least before he wrote Tom Bombadil. So, anyways, diversion.
Well, we will actually cover that too, what this old forest probably reminded him of, or at least part of it. But we'll get there in a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So they leave. Anything to really say about like actually leaving? I don't really have much besides that Mary was very prepared.
Yeah, Frodo was sleeping in. Yeah. Seemed caught off guard a little bit.
And they say bye to Fatty, and they go through a tunnel through the hedge.
The part with the hedge surprised me, actually. It sounded like a super intense hedge with this like brick tunnel built into it.
Yeah.
It was pretty long with an actual locked iron gate at the end.
And there were like spider webs on the top of it too.
Yeah, this was, very different scale and setting a little bit, but almost like the
Don't
wall.
say it. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I won't say it.
That's what I thought. Say it so that I can say that you didn't say it,
Okay, the wall to the north in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I figured.
But specifically like the idea of a really big thing with this like little hole poked through the bottom of it.
Yeah.
With a gate. Is more built up of a hedge and much more of a defense than I expected from the description in the last chapter. So it certainly makes it sound like they were protecting against something.
Well, we can talk about that now because they brought up in the chapter that the trees in the old forest once attacked the hedge, right?
Right. There was there at least stories that the trees move and have personalities or something like that. And so it sounds like back in the day when they were building the hedge, there was some sort of attack where the trees crowded up against the hedge and were reaching their limbs over. And in retaliation, the hobbits cleared out like 100 meters from the back of the hedge and burnt it. And since then, the trees haven't come back towards the hedge.
Right, and so this is kind of interesting because at this point, up until this point, it seems like hobbits have like loved nature.
Yeah.
In every respect, but
this is a very old school like fend off the wilderness.
Right. So it sounds like they love nature, but they're also willing to tame it when it suits them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Or perhaps we've been looking only in the Shire where everything is pretty idyllic, and this is our first confrontation with the wild, or the world beyond the Shire.
Okay. Though the Shire, when they first found it, probably wasn't tame. They probably had to tame it there too.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Any cool details you've read about this forest? I got some.
Well, as we were saying earlier, it definitely they've got this constant feeling like the trees are watching them. They're being surveyed or something like that. And there's also the feeling like the trees might be moving.
Not
They can't
might.
actually.
I think like Mary like decided like yeah they definitely are because there was no.
I guess I should rephrase that. They don't see the trees actually moving. It's not like the trees are personified necessarily. Like you don't notice that they're taking steps or something like that. But they definitely feel like the trees are moving.
Yeah.
And they, on occasion, trying to trip them, what have you, confuse them.
Drop branches.
Right.
Yeah, and then Mary also said at night they're even like way creepier. Like they whisper to each other and they possibly move to like hem in the strangers and everything. So kind of cool. And yeah, so and then we were talking. Yeah, you had mentioned already. Pippin was crying out to say like, "Hey, I'm not going to harm you or anything." But after that, I had read that it just gets more muffled and stuffy. What do you got?
Well, so Pippin yells out, "I'm not going to do anything. Just let me pass through, will you?" And everyone's kind of startled by that. And it definitely did feel muffled. There was no echo. Mary warns him, "I would not shout if I were you. It does more harm than good."
Mm-hmm.
And just a few moments later, though, Mary gives a whistle of relief and points ahead. "Well, well," he said, "these trees do shift. There is the bonfire glade in front of us, or so I hope so. But the path to it seems to have moved away."
Well, they didn't shift because of Pippin. They just shifted since the last time he had been in the forest.
Well, okay. I interpreted that as Pippin kind of makes this announcement, "Hey, we're just trying to pass through. We're not trying to do you any harm." And slowly the trees respond a little bit to that and basically show them the way.
Agree to disagree, I guess, Clifford. All right. Frodo also starts to attempt to sing a song about forest ending. How about? Do you want to read that? Do you have it?
Yes. "Oh, wanderers in the shadowed land, despair not, for though dark stand, all woods there be must end at last, and see the open sun go past, the setting sun, the rising sun, the day's end or the day begun. For east and west all woods must fail." And Mary responds, They do not like at all that about ending and failing.
Yeah, like I think a branch drops too.
Yeah,
Right
like
in front of him.
Frodo gets cut short. And he says that the air seemed heavy and the making of words wearisome.
Oh, man. The making of words are wearisome. Damn.
Right. So there's almost this like metaphysical pressure on them, and then plus the branches and the feeling of things not being good.
Right. All right. So, just one. I had a note on there from, I think it's Author of the Century, from Tom Shippey's books. So that one, it said, it's kind of typical with the Shire lyrics, like all the Shire poetry that we have throughout this, that there's a clear meaning in this, like right off the bat, that Frodo's literally talking about a forest and all forests have to end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also noteworthy, too, that most of these Shire rhymes or poems, they all have some sort of different context. And so there's this good note here from Shippey. However, despite the immediate context, what Frodo also means is something, as usual in Shire poetry, more general and more symbolic, that the world is like a wood, in which one can easily wander lost and confused. But that in the end, and in this context, that perhaps means after life in Middle-earth is over, all will become clear.
Remind me where that came from?
This was a note in Tom Shippey's book, but it was like in reference to a song. So it's like the song. So yeah, the song's literally talking about a forest ending, but then it's also like symbolic of everything ending too.
Right. All bad things must come to an end.
I mean,
or
all things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. I don't know. It kind of random in here, but it's just fun to point it out when we get it.
Yeah.
So this is the second forest throughout the Tolkien universe that we've come across.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you think? How do you think this compares to what was the first one?
Mirkwood from The Hobbit.
So how do they compare?
This one, well, strong similarities at first glance. We've got mystery, rumors of very bad things creeping around, a general sense of it being unknown and dangerous territory. Mirkwood, yeah, both just sound very primeval, very wild.
Which that if we remember from the Mirkwood episodes, that kind of goes back to like in ancient times, the forests were that's what they were. Like they were just like a dark shadow in the way that you had to kind of cross, or they were on like the edges of lands and stuff, and they were always creepy like that.
Right, and if any of you have ever been in old growth forests, like you can find that in some national parks and some places in the world. There's not that much of it left, but like true old growth forest is really, even if it's bright and sunny outside, it's really like dark and gnarly inside. You've got just fallen stuff all over, like dense undergrowth. You can't see very far. It's really complex terrain to move through. You can imagine for anyone like coming across land for the first time, or that being on the fringes of developed land, just being like legitimately like an unknown or dangerous or scary place. But on that note, Mirkwood, from what I remember, had a feeling of being specifically dangerous. Creatures, perhaps. No one's sure. And there's a defined path. Here, this is more a depiction of weirdness. No one really knows what goes on, and it sounds like the confusion is the most dangerous part of this forest.
Yeah, I feel like Mirkwood has, like you said, more dangerous creatures, but you also just get like kind of mentally disillusioned in there. Whereas here, it's like no, you literally get lost, and it's I don't know, like the physical surroundings are themselves more dangerous. Like the trees themselves are more dangerous here.
Right, the paths change, disappear, reappear.
Yeah, and as we'll see, there is like kind of a heart or dangerous part of this forest at least. Whereas Mirkwood, Mirkwood had just so much evil stuff in it. Like the necromancer was living there and everything.
Right.
Whereas
although we got this sense from The Hobbit, or at least looking back on the whole book, that at one time Mirkwood was called Greenwood.
Right.
Right, and was basically a brighter, happier place. Definitely sounds like still wild, but in a lush, happy way rather than a dark, scary way.
Right.
And that's where the Greenwood elves settled down, and it wasn't until it fell under the influence of the necromancer.
Whereas this one seems kind of just kind of creepy and scary on its own, period.
Right.
Like it's itself isn't, it's not like it was corrupted. It just kind of is bad in general.
Yeah, I get the impression that time and space is a little bit warped here. Like it's sort of blur on the map.
Yeah. They come to a clearing at the top of a hill, and then they can kind of get their geography straight. And I could keep up with the geography in this chapter. I was pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, I actually, that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you. It was a more geographically heavy chapter than some of the others.
All right,
can you give me a little some pointers or some updates on where we're at relative to the maps that we have in the books?
All right, so we got the Shire. We went to the east end of the Shire to Buckland, right? And then we continued going east through Buckland, and now they make it to the top of this hill here. And so at the top of Buckland is like an actual bridge across the river, whereas our hobbits just took the ferry across. You remember that, right? So that bridge across the river is where the main road is. So that would have been the road that Bilbo traveled to get to Rivendell back when he was adventuring. Yeah, the east. Well, that road goes east, but it goes through the Shire, so east and west. But yeah, mostly east. So they get to the top of this hill, and so now that they were in the forest, they did that to get away from the Black Riders, but they don't really want to stay in the forest, right? So they want to just cut towards the road. So the road is north of them, right? And they're going east, so they want to go northeast to get to the road. Like that'll be the ideal. what they can also see from the top of the hill is there's a river. Like they can see like the gorge kind of like a river running through the forest, which they know is the Withywindle River. And so I kind of assume, let me look at a map, but I assume that thing also kind of goes northeast as well.
The Withywindle?
Yeah, because eventually it flows.
Runs from the northeast to the southwest.
Yeah,
it meets up with the Brandywine, which is the big river that forms the edge of the Shire in between the Shire and Buckland.
Yeah.
This might be if the East Road is I-80 and the Brandywine is the Mississippi River. Then
no, the Brandywine's not the Mississippi River.
I'm just trying to orient some people.
Dude, this is
and
like
the Withywindle then could be the Illinois River, I'd say, or the Ohio, but one of those rivers. And then they're in like downstate Illinois, trying to go up towards.
Clifford, this isn't going to help anybody. We don't have many people from Illinois listening to this thing.
Point being, they're trying to cut through a little, like a little shoulder of the forest, and the river Withywindle runs right through the middle of it. So they're hoping to go through just the edge of the forest and get up and out of it pretty quickly, up to the East Road where they can make better time.
Right, but notably, they don't want to make it to the Withywindle itself because that's where all the creepy stuff lives. Like the creepiest part of it, the forest is.
Right. Everything that's warped is the most warped there.
Additionally, they don't want to go straight through to the east because when they come out of, like if they go east of the forest, then they come to the Barrow Downs. Barrow Downs? How are we going to say this?
Barrow Downs?
Barrow Downs. They come to the Barrow Downs, which have an even more sinister reputation in the Shire than the Old Forest does.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, they obviously try to head northeast to kind of cut straight to the road from here, right?
Do you have more than one map in your...
I have a Shire map at the front, and then in the back I have like the big map, but it's divided in like 4 quadrants of like the whole thing. But I can see the Withywindle on my Shire map.
Right. It says a part of the Shire in the top right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see the hedge in there and everything. Mm-hmm. And the gate. It took them an hour to get from Crick Hollow to the gate. That doesn't look... maybe it does look that far. All right. All right, so they start going, and what happens?
Well, they basically get turned off course. The path only leads down and to the right.
Right, so anytime they try to go northeast, there's a bunch of bushes or... not really cliffs, what's it called? Like bluffs? I don't know. Something in their way that they can't just climb over it. Right. And so then they finally even just give up on that, and it's like, all right, forget it. I guess we're just going to go where this path leads us, which is southeast, which is, straight to the Withywindle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they come to the Withywindle. Now we got stuff to talk about here. So I know you're bringing up your, Wind in the Willows?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here...
I have another reference for you in a second.
Well, maybe you should say your reference first, because I think from what I've read, I think I got this nailed down what Tolkien's reference was.
I don't know if anyone saw the movie Annihilation. Came out maybe last year. It was like Natalie Portman is like a military recon person.
Oh, I saw a preview for that crap.
It was kind of like a weird like post-apocalyptic thing. But they go into this territory where like everything is very confusing and very beautiful, but kind of scary, and no one can figure out what's going wrong until they realize that everything is scrambled, like radio waves, light waves, sound, DNA, all of it is jumbled. Like all of the signals are mixed. So it had a similar feeling where it's like this hazy, beautiful forest, but things start getting stranger and stranger as they go deeper into it. Made me think of this. But keep going.
Oh, all right. That's a fair thing to bring up. Though I'm sure that one was not Tolkien's inspiration.
No, certainly not.
Okay. All right. So
although
here's
the
the deal.
screenplay was no.
All right. So here, this also comes from J.R.R. Tolkien, Author of the Century by Tom Shippey. There's no way I'm gonna know this off the top of my head, so I'm just gonna kind of read his description from here. It's not very long, but this is like spot on what it is. All right. So this first part's an excerpt from the book. A golden afternoon of late sunshine lay warm and drowsy upon the hidden land between. In the midst of it there wound lazily a dark river of brown water, bordered with ancient willows, arched over with willows, blocked with fallen willows, and flecked with thousands of willow leaves. The air was thick with them, fluttering yellow from the branches. From there was a warm and gentle breeze flowing softly in the valley, and the reeds were rustling, and the willow boughs were creaking. So, what I'm about to read here, all our English listeners, they should listen to this description well, and they should go to this place for a picnic. I wish I could, but I'm not across the pond. So, here we go. I continue. This is Tom Shippey's own words here. If Tolkien had left his study in Northmoor Road, which that's like the house they lived in Oxford, walked back to the university parks, crossed the Rainbow Bridge, and then walked along the other side of the river away from the town of Oxford in the direction of the villages of Wood Eaton and Water Eaton, as no doubt he did, he would have seen virtually the same sight, the slow, muddy, lazy river fringed with willows. The real river, the one that flows into the Thames at Oxford, is the Cherwell. So, the description of this is a real place.
Wow.
Like, just
Pretty
spitting
cool.
image. Yeah. That is cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, I would go there. Like, if I ever go to Oxford, it's like, oh, I'm totally checking this place out.
Yeah.
Guaranteed that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what I expected. It sounds like a very, I've never spent any time in the English countryside, but it is what I would imagine, what I could imagine the British Isles, like a rural version of that, just as the Shire is, this sort of idyllic depiction of English or Irish farmland. This is like the forests and the streams nearby. So in one sense, it's not all that surprising that Tolkien's pulling from the settings around him that he clearly is very fond of. But it's also unique in that sense because he's, as we discussed in previous chapters, he projects a lot of admiration onto the Shire and its basically pastoralism. And here we have a stranger and murkier depiction.
Yes. Yeah. Withy Windle. Should we
what's up with that?
philology for that?
Yes, definitely. I've drawn up a total blank.
Yeah, we haven't been doing that a lot in the previous episodes.
We could, if you want to, we could throw in Buckland right now.
Oh, do you know what it is?
No.
Okay. Well, so Buckland, yeah, you know what I heard? All right, for this. So Buckland, I think that the buck part is like a common thing in English, but I think that derives from booked, as in booked land, which means it was church-owned land. And like that was like kind of, yeah, like the church's property.
Okay.
So anyways, so that was Buckland. Anyways, Withy Windle here. So Withy just means, that's the old word for willow. And then Windle is kind of like windy / twisty, like the course of the river.
Okay.
So that's all it is. Pretty simple one, but still fun to do.
Okay.
We can do.
Yeah. So what? Wife is?
No, it's Withy. Where are you getting? Do you say something else? Wythe?
Maybe I have been saying wife. Withy. Okay, Withy.
I mean, it's with and then a Y.
Okay. There's a word in construction called a wife, like a wife of brick, which is WYTHE, that I thought might be similar, but I doubt it is. Anyways.
All right. Should we move on to the Old Man Willow?
Definitely. So, we've hit the river, things are weird, and they get weirder. Everyone falls asleep. Bad news. This is, I feel like, a classic something's going wrong in the story when suddenly everyone feels sleepy.
Yeah,
and starts falling over.
Right, and it's kind of almost like a classic Hobbit thing, but I think this one was deliberate enough that it's like, no, there's something in the air, there's some sort of magic, if you will, going on here.
Right.
Like, this isn't like Hobbit stupidity, or Hobbit, laziness.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure ideas like this have been around for a long time, but I think this little snippet stretches back to like the Odyssey or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the island where Odysseus falls asleep in the flowers.
Yeah, I'm not gonna remember that either. But even Tour in the early versions of all the Gondolin stories, like Tour and his coming there, he spent time in Nan Tatharin, which was the land of the Willows, and he really enjoyed it there. And like that was the original idea, was to have Ulmo meet him there, because Turin liked it so much that he was just hanging out there and staying there and like not getting on his objective to go to Gondolin. So Ulmo had to show up there, you know.
It was the lotus flower from the Odyssey. That's what I was thinking of.
Isn't that the like drugs?
Yeah. I mean, I think in other stories, it's like someone walks through a field of poppies and they're
like Wizard of Oz. Yeah,
sort of enchanted.
Wizard of Oz. Okay. Wizard of Oz, Clifford.
Gotcha.
10 out of 10 movie.
This
10
is
out
a
of 10
very,
movie.
very old concept, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
But once again, something sinister is going on here.
Right. All right. So they're all falling asleep, feeling droopy. You already said this in your Cliff's Notes, but I'll just go over it again. So Merry and Pippin fell asleep next to the trunk of the tree, whereas Frodo was falling asleep on the roots of the tree right near the water. Right. And so then for some reason, Sam's not affected as much, and he starts getting a weird vibe from the tree and everything. And so he's going to like just gather all the supplies and like the ponies because they're about to run off or whatnot. And then he hears a splash, and then, to quote, a snick of a lock when a door quietly closes fast. So like a, I don't know.
Or like a little like click.
I don't know.
Try it again.
Is that good?
No.
Okay. All right. So he sees, I kind of read it as like the tree root was almost drowning Frodo, but then it wasn't quite like holding him. Maybe it was holding him down. I don't know how it could really be holding him down. But
I don't know either, but I definitely read that as well. Like it was forcing his head under, giving him a swirly.
Yeah, and he wasn't even struggling too, so
right.
somehow he didn't wake up as soon as he hit the water.
Right.
Weird. So Sam saves him from that. Meanwhile, the tree had already swallowed Pippin whole, and it had most of Merry, but his legs were still sticking out, right? Mm-hmm. And so then, obviously, Frodo and Sam are freaking out. They want to try to figure out how to get Merry and Pippin, but they don't have like any axes to cut down this tree or anything. Mm-hmm. So what they do have is they have firewood and everything. So they go to the other side of the tree and start a fire to try to scare the tree to let him go, like make him let it go, which that's kind of a good plan. And it's also good to not do it on the Merry and Pippin side, obviously.
Right. Although, as we'll see, it's a good idea, but then if this tree is somehow animate and you're making me really mad, could be a bad idea.
Well, yeah, immediately Merry and Pippin are yelling for them to stop doing that because the tree's like threatening to squeeze them to death, right? Mm-hmm. Which I guess when you're on the inside of the tree, it can communicate better with you. Also creepy.
Yes. This little moment is maybe just a manifestation of all these weird sensations they've been having about the forest up to this point, where here the tree is pretty much fully animate. And it's moving, it's taking actions, it's responding, and even to the point of Merry and Pippin saying that it's speaking to them.
Yeah, and this is, they kind of were aware that they were heading towards it, and based on the rumors they knew this, but it's like, yeah, they're literally at the heart of the forest now. Like this is the root of all the weirdness of it, and like all like the dangerous badness, I guess. But yeah. So anyways, Sam puts out the fire. Frodo screams for help, and then all of a sudden, Frodo's call was answered. Enter Tom Bombadil. In the strangest intro of all time.
Hey, come merry doll, derry doll, me darling. Light goes the weather wind and the feathered starling. Down along Underhill, shining in the sunlight, waiting on the doorstep to the cold starlight. There, my pretty lady is, river woman's daughter, slender as the willow wand, clearer than the water. Old Tom Bombadil, water lilies bringing, comes hopping home again. Can you hear him singing? Hey, come merry doll, derry doll, and merry-o, goldberry, mellow, yellowberry-o. Poor old willow man, you tuck your roots away. Tom is in a hurry now. Evening will follow day. Tom's going home again, water lilies bringing. Hey, come merry doll, can you hear me singing?
So I feel like that gives you like a pretty good sense of the type of character he is. He's got this like goofy, whimsical, and just very strange like song that he's singing about himself, and rhyming. He seems like very cheerful and playful, but then is also, it's more than he's like not a specifically childish character in my opinion.
Oh, I think he kind of is, because it's like, looking at that, he's singing about how he's carrying water lilies home like a 6-year-old from like school, like when you got like the
Yes.
little.
Yeah, okay. I guess at first glance he's totally childish. Like he's this guy like literally just skipping through the woods, yelling at the top of his lungs with an armful of flowers. But then I don't know. I right in that introduction, like without any other explanation, you get the sense that he's talking to the woods around him, like he's talking to the willow. He's mentioning like the cycling of time with like night into day or day into night, and he's alluding to what we assume to be his lover or his wife or something, who's the river woman's daughter, which is like she's some sort of like spirit or nymph or something like that. So I get the impression like right away he seems very childish, but is like somehow connected to the forest in a deeper way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it maybe is like he's a more abstract character because he's talking about like these very fundamental natural phenomena.
Right. All right. Should we finish off the episode, or should we do his description?
Let's do his description. I guess we should preface that the next episode is all about him. So we'll definitely go into the level.
All right. Okay. Well, so yeah. So from the description we got about him, he's got a tall hat with a blue feather, too large and heavy for a hobbit, but too small for a big person. That would be like a man, maybe an elf, I guess. He was noisy. He had great yellow boots, thick legs, a blue coat, a long brown beard, bright blue eyes, and a red face. And he talks in verse, like basically intentionally / like kind of unintentionally. Like he has verses in here, which is what Clifford just read, but he's also got, his prose lines also seem like verse too.
Right.
Very, very lyrical and melodic.
Right. Basically he almost never speaks in prose. Even when he's speaking in prose, it's still poetry.
Yeah. And yeah, so he shows up. Frodo and Sam beg him for help from the willow, which is like, at first thought, it's like, I don't know, you're already recognizing connection to the forest, but it is kind of like, well, can he actually do anything here?
Right.
But he says it'll help him to save his friends, right? So he goes up and he starts calling this tree the Old Man Willow, and he basically kind of just scolds it and gets it to release Merry and Pippin, which it does.
And kind of spits them up almost, like they get launched out of the tree trunk like they got kicked.
Yeah. Yeah. I got one last thing on the Willow Man, and then we're going to get back to Bombadil here. Okay. So, well, we were already describing how this spot kind of seems like, it seems like something that Tolkien would have already visited already, like right outside of Oxford in the woods. So this Willow Man, this also comes from Tom Shippey's book. So Willow Man, meanwhile, though a gray, thirsty spirit, filled with a hatred of things that go free upon the earth, works mostly by the power of sleep. He sends an overpowering drowsiness so he can trap or drown the hobbits. Such a power is notoriously at its height in long, quiet summer afternoons, especially, some say, in the river bottom country like Oxford. So yeah, it goes back to like classic tale from like Odysseus or the Wizard of Oz, where people are falling asleep and everything, but it's also still, even that idea is kind of still, in this situation, is kind of still related to Oxford, where the apparently famous Oxford sleepies, where you just want to rest on the hot summer afternoon.
Yeah.
Back to Bombadil.
From your description, I was going to say he sounds like in some ways like some sort of Johnny Appleseed, or like a cross between Johnny Appleseed and Paul Bunyan or something. Like,
or what about like isn't it Rip Van Winkle that falls asleep for like 20 years?
Yeah, although Rip Van Winkle's like totally like he's pretty helpless. This guy seems very in control and totally happy-go-lucky.
Well, Paul Bunyan seems way more manly and stern than Tom.
Yeah,
Bombadil. But
this guy, like the big boots and the thick legs and the big beard, noisy. He seems like maybe a bit like Bjorn also in The Hobbit.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, runs the land.
Right.
Yeah.
He's very at home in his settings.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, so he says he's coming. They're gonna come home for dinner with him, which is good because apparently this forest is super creepy at night, right?
Right, right.
And then,
These guys, the hobbits, have no idea who this guy is, and they don't really know if they should trust him. But he did just save them, so they really have no other choice.
but do you have anything else to say with Bombadil?
I don't think so. We'll get to more stuff along.
Yeah, I mean the whole next chapter is about him. Spoiler. Yeah, so I guess we'll just finish it off with just the ending of the chapter because it was just really cool scene, good read.
It became difficult to follow the path, and they were very tired. Their legs seemed leaden. Strange, furtive noises ran among the bushes and reeds on either side of them, and if they looked up to the pale sky, they caught sight of queer, gnarled, and knobbly faces that gloomed dark against the twilight, and leered down at them from the high bank and the edges of the wood. They began to feel that all this country was unreal, and that they were stumbling through an ominous dream that led to no awakening. Just as they felt their feet slowing down to a standstill, they noticed that the ground was gently rising. The water began to murmur. In the darkness they caught the white glimmer of foam, where the river flowed over a short fall. Then suddenly the trees came to an end and the mists were left behind. They stepped out of the forest, and found a wide sweep of grass welling up before them. The river, now small and swift, was leaping merrily down to greet them, glinting here and there in the light of the stars, which were already shining in the sky. The grass under their feet was smooth and short, as if it had been mown or shaven. The eaves of the forest behind were clipped, and trim as a hedge. The path was now plain before them, well tended and bordered with stone. It wound up to the top of the grassy knoll, now grey under the pale starry night, and there, still high up above them on a further slope, they saw the twinkling lights of a house. Down again the path went, and then up again, up a long smooth hillside of turf, towards the light. Suddenly a wide yellow beam flowed out brightly from a door that was opened. There was Tom Bombadil's house before them, up, down, under hill. Behind it a steep shoulder of the land lay grey and bare, and beyond that the dark shapes of the Barrow Downs stalked away into the eastern night. They hurried forward, hobbits and ponies. Already half their weariness and all their fears had fallen from them. "Hey, come, merry doll," rolled out the song to greet them. "Hey, come, derry doll, hop along, my hearties, hobbits, ponies all, we are fond of parties. Now let the fun begin, let us sing together." Then another clear voice, as young and as ancient as spring, like the song of a glad water flowing down into the night from a bright morning in the hills, came falling like silver to meet them. "Now let the song begin, let us sing together, of sun, stars, moon, and mist, rain and cloudy weather, light on the budding leaf, dew on the feather, wind on the open hill, bells on the heather, reeds by the shady pool, lilies on the water, old Tom Bombadil and the river daughter." And with that song the hobbits stood upon the threshold, and a golden light was all about them.
Hop along, my little friends, up the withy windle. Tom's going on ahead, candles for to kindle. Down west sinks the sun, soon you will be groping. When the night shadows fall, then the door will open. Out of the window panes light will twinkle yellow. Fear no alder black, heed no hoary willow. Fear neither root nor bough, Tom goes on before you. Hey now, merry doll, we'll be waiting for you.
Alright, just me tonight. Clifford's traveling across the country again for the upteenth time. Who knows what he's doing or where he's at. So I'll just keep it short tonight. We got one review from Jadoki. Maybe that's Greek. I don't really know. Alright, 5 stars. Obviously that's the key. A well talked out episode. Both hosts do a good job of going scene by scene in the chapter and really personifying the characters and setting. I do like how certain things relate to what we've already read in this series, as well as the discussion of foreshadowing on what may be coming. Alright, cool. Nice job. That was a pretty kind of surface level, but we'll take it. Great job. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Hope Advent's going well as we prepare for Christmas here. Have a good week, everybody, and we'll be back next week. All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, y'all.